Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to share with you how I created this birthday card, which uses a whole lot of embossing. The stamp set that I used for this card is the Big Birthday Greetings stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I started out by taking the candle from that stamp set and putting it on a large acrylic block, and then I stamped it repeatedly with Versamark ink onto some Bazzill Licorice Twist cardstock, which I prepped with a powder tool for embossing. I didn't know how many of these candles I needed, but I knew that I wanted a ridiculous amount of them. So I just filled up this entire sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. Next, I went over those candles with my Alabaster white embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and while I was doing this, I did make a little bit of a mess because that coffee filter that I was using to catch the embossing powder just wasn't quite big enough for this piece of paper, so I had that powder fall onto my mat, but that's easy to clean up. I just used a paintbrush and I swept it up. Once all of the candles were embossed, I took a dry cloth and I wiped away all of the powder that was left over from my powder tool. And then I ran this entire sheet through my scan and cut, and that cut out all of the candles. Now I am going to leave all of these candles black, but I decided to take a white Prismacolor pencil and add a little bit of shading to each of the flames. I think that really makes it look like it's kind of glowing. For the background of my card, I took out another piece of Bazzill Licorice Twist cardstock and I prepped it with my powder tool. And over the top of that, I have the Abstract Triangle Stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm smushing my Versamark ink pad into that stencil so that I can leave the design on the paper for embossing. I went over that stencil design with Icicle embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, which is a clear embossing powder. Once this background was completely embossed, I used my Tonic Trimmer to cut it down to be 5 by 5. I wanted most of this card to be black and white, but I decided to add just a hint of color along the edge of this background. So I took my Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink and I'm blending that along the edge. And when I first blend it, it looks a little bit too much. It looks almost like I made a mistake, but that's just because the ink is sitting on top of that embossed area. So I took a dry cloth and I rubbed away as much of that ink as I could, and then it's just a very subtle looking hint of blue. I popped up this background onto a 5.5 by 5.5 card base with foam tape, and I really think that foam tape helps get rid of some of the warping that happened on this paper when I did all of the embossing. I laid out a row of the candles along the bottom of the card, and then I started to glue them down using my Gina Designs Connect glue. Now, I could have placed all of these candles very straight and organized, but because of the mood that I'm going for with this birthday card, I wanted the candles to look very unorganized and almost disheveled. Once I finished adding that first layer of candles, I started to add my second layer of candles, but for this layer, there is a thin piece of foam tape on the back of each of these candles so that they are popped up and they give the card a little bit of extra dimension. Once I was happy with the placement of all of my candles, I very carefully cut the bottoms of the candles to be flush with that stenciled background of the card. For the sentiment on my card, I picked out one of the stamps from the Big Birthday Greetings stamp set, and I stamped that onto some Bazzill Licorice Twist cardstock, which I prepped with my powder tool, and I'm embossing that with the Alabaster white embossing powder. Once that was embossed, I very carefully fussy cut around those words, and then I took that sentiment and I adhered it onto some vellum with my Gina Designs Connect glue, and again I used some scissors to fussy cut around those words, leaving a nice vellum border around the edge. I then added some foam tape to the back of that sentiment, and I popped it up on my card above the candles in the center of the card. The last thing that I did to finish up this card is I took out my Wink of Stella glitter brush and I went over that whole sentiment so that it's nice and sparkly. And here's a closer look at the finished card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed this card design using that Big Birthday Greetings stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. All of the supplies that I used for today's card can be found in the description down below. If this is your first time on my channel and you enjoyed watching today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can see all of my future videos. I do new card videos every single week, and I'm going to be back with another one really soon. Again, thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a good day today.